Imagine you stand at the harbor gates of Constantinople and the future arrives on wet planks. You smell salt, pitch, sweat, then something sharper, like iron left too long in the rain. A ship from Egypt bumps the pier. The city needs its grain. The army needs its grain. The emperor needs this grain to keep the world believing the empire still controls the world. But a sailor drops to his knees as if the boards suddenly turn to mud. You see his hands claw at nothing. You feel the crowd lean in, hungry for news, hungry for bread, hungry for certainty. Then another man folds in half, and the word that outruns every courier spills from someone's mouth, plague. You stand close enough to see the sailor's eyes glaze like blown glass. You hear the slap of sandals as people back away, but not fast enough. Somebody yanks at his tunic, not with mercy but with fear, exposing skin and searching for swellings in places decent eyes avoid. You see a lump near the groin, raised and angry, as if the body tries to push something out. A woman screams, not at him, at the idea that this could jump. The scream hits the crowd like a stone in water. Therefore bodies ripple, pushing, shoving, elbowing. The pier becomes a mouth that tries to spit itself clean. You are a mid-level palace courier attached to the grain administration, just important enough to receive orders, just expendable enough to carry blame. An official in a dyed cloak grabs your arm hard, fingers digging like hooks. Run, he barks. Customs. Then the palace. Another official cuts in, breath hot with panic. No, seal the ship. Quarantine. Lock the pier. They argue in your face as if volume can change nature. Unload the grain or starve, quarantine the ship or doom the city. The choice tastes like blood either way. You see dock workers hesitate, hands hovering over ropes as if the hemp itself burns. You feel the pressure of thousands of mouths in the city behind you, mouths that do not care about quarantine, only bread. But you also feel the stare of the sea, indifferent, as if it brings gifts and curses with the same wave. The argument turns into commands flung like knives. Therefore you move, because standing still is how couriers die. You sprint. You push through a crowd and feel hands grabbing you, not to stop you, but to steady themselves as their legs fail. A man's palm slides down your sleeve, slick with sweat. You smell him up close, sour wine, fear, something rotten that does not belong in a living body. He tries to speak, but coughs instead, and every cough feels like a thrown dart. Therefore you twist away and keep running. The harbor noise breaks into fragments, gulls, rope creak, someone praying, someone cursing foreigners, someone blaming God. You hear 3 stories at once. A fishmonger spits and says it is a curse for sin. A soldier says poison rides the air. A priest says strangers carry it in their clothes. None of it helps you decide what to do in the next 60 heartbeats. Therefore you clamp down on thought and follow the streets like a channel. Your call is simple and impossible. Deliver the truth to the palace before the palace becomes another tomb. The city swallows you. You sprint under archways where vendors already slam shutters down like shields. You see bolts slide, locks turn, hands shaking as they secure wood against an enemy that fits through breath. A bakery line coils like a snake, but the line turns into a rumor line, each person leaning toward the next, whispering as if whispers cannot infect. Therefore the line frays as soon as someone coughs. Bread stops being bread and becomes a reason to risk death. You cut past a fountain where water should mean life. Instead, you see people avoid the cup, as if water itself learns treachery. A boy dips fingers in, then jerks back when his mother slaps his hand. The slap is loud. Therefore heads turn. Every head turn is a question. Is that child sick? Is that mother sick? Suspicion spreads faster than the illness anyone understands. A clerk's office waits ahead, a building that smells of ink and wool. You burst inside and the air changes, closer, warmer, thick with human breath. You see rows of men hunched over tables, styluses scratching, pens dipping. Their hands shake, but they keep writing because the empire is made of paper. A supervisor snatches your message, eyes darting as if the wax seal is a viper. Therefore he calls for another record, another copy, another proof that the machine still turns. But a scribe sways on his stool, blinks too slowly, and his ink blot spreads like a bruise across the page. You hear the scratch stop. You see the pen slide from the scribe's fingers and clatter. Everyone freezes because the sound is small, but the meaning is huge. Another pair of hands disappears. Therefore, another clerk shifts to cover the work, shoulders tightening. But his cough breaks free, shallow at first, then deeper. The room flinches as if struck. You push back out into the street because staying indoors feels like agreeing to be trapped. A messenger from another department runs toward you, face pale, eyes too bright. He shouts without slowing, "Infirmaries overflow." Therefore, your route changes. The palace can wait a breath longer. The city's veins clog now. You turn toward the nearest hospital ward. The infirmary doorway is a mouth that exhales suffering. You step in and the smell hits: vinegar, sweat, pus, smoke from burning incense, and underneath it all, the sweet-sour reek of bodies losing their fight. You see attendants with cloths tied over their noses, eyes red from smoke and tears. A man on a pallet arches his back, nails scraping wood, begging for water. Therefore, an attendant thrusts a cup to his lips. But he cannot swallow. Liquid spills down his chin like a wasted blessing. His eyes roll back and he goes still, so suddenly the room cannot pretend he rests. You carry orders to the wardmaster. He snatches the tablet, scans it, and laughs once, short, cracked. More beds, the order demands. More attendants. You see him stare at the packed floor where bodies lie shoulder to shoulder. Therefore he gestures at the air, at the lack of space, at the lack of hands. But still he tries. He points, barks, rearranges the living like furniture around the dying. A woman shrieks as swellings in her armpit throb like a second heart. You feel your own throat tighten, not from sickness, but from the urge to gag. An attendant presses vinegar-soaked cloth to a patient's buboes, as if acid can bully death. You see incense smoke curl upward, prayers rising like desperate birds. Therefore hope becomes a ritual. Rub, burn, pray, repeat. But the bodies do not care about ritual. Some die in hours. Some linger long enough to grab your sleeve and whisper a name: child, spouse, saint, or just sound. You step outside because air feels like a debt you must pay back quickly. The street stares at you. People see the infirmary on your clothes, on your face, even if you wash. You feel space open around you as pedestrians edge away, pretending they simply need to pass. Therefore, isolation becomes a new form of violence. No stones, no swords, just distance that wounds. A cart rattles by carrying jars of vinegar and bundles of cloth, as if supplies can outpace the dying. But the dying outpace everything. You turn a corner and find men dragging a corpse by the ankles because there are not enough hands for dignity. You see the dead man's head bump against stones, mouth open as if still complaining. Therefore you help, because refusal feels like cowardice and because orders keep coming regardless of compassion. But once you grip the ankles, you feel how heavy a person becomes when the soul leaves. The weight is not just flesh, it is finality. The corpse goes to a wagon stacked with bodies, no shrouds now, just limbs. You see arms tangled like driftwood, hair matted, faces turned away or turned up to the sky with eyes half open. The driver does not look at you. If he looks, he might recognize you. If he recognizes you, he might remember he is human and stop working. Therefore, his gaze stays fixed on the road. Efficiency replaces mourning. You move again because standing still invites tasks that do not end. A temple bell rings, but no one gathers. Sound becomes background to fear. You see a man throw coins onto a doorstep and snatch a loaf left there, as if bread now requires bribery and distance. Therefore, the market changes shape. But not everyone can pay. A thin woman reaches for the loaf too late, her fingers close on air, and her face collapses with hunger that feels older than the city. Dispatches arrive from the frontiers, and you carry them, because paper must move even when bodies cannot. You deliver a sealed note to a military clerk whose beard grows wild in days, whose eyes never stop scanning. You hear fragments: Garrisons along the Danube go thin, units in Italy lose men without battle, camps echo with coughing. Therefore the empire bleeds without wounds. But commanders still demand recruits, still demand pay, still demand replacements that do not exist. Absence becomes the enemy's ally. You walk past a training yard where soldiers should drill. You see empty space where shield walls should form. A single officer shouts at a handful of men, his voice angry enough to summon legions, but nothing answers except the scrape of sandals. Therefore ambition stalls. But the emperor's dreams, reconquest, glory, Rome reborn, still hang in the air like banners no one holds. A banner flaps once and falls limp against its pole. Panic argues with bureaucracy every hour. You enter another office and see clerks press wax seals with trembling thumbs. A man counts coins for pay chests, lips moving in silent arithmetic, because numbers feel safer than breath. Therefore the empire tries to outright the plague, but paper outlives people. A tax roll lies open, names neat, as if names can demand payment from graves. Rumor stabs the palace district like a hidden dagger. You hear it in alleys, in doorways, in the hush between footsteps. Justinian is sick. Some say dying. Some say already dead and hidden. You do not know what is true, only that power wobbles while the plague stands steady. Therefore, every official speaks faster, signs quicker, hoards information like bread. But haste makes mistakes, and mistakes in an empire become law. A wrong seal can move an army, a wrong order can starve a district. The plague comes in waves, which is worse than a single blow. Just when a street dares to breathe again, another cluster of deaths hits like a returning fist. You see shutters reopen, then slam again. You hear laughter from a courtyard, then silence the next morning. Therefore hope becomes dangerous. But despair becomes tiring, and tired people take risks. A man attends a funeral and returns with fever. Another refuses funerals and dies alone. Imagine the decisive day arrives not with trumpets, but with quiet. You are ordered to the palace district with a sealed message. The streets are so still your sandals sound like a drumbeat in a tomb. You see doorways stuffed with rags to block air, as if air itself turns traitor. Therefore your breath becomes loud in your own ears. But the message wax presses against your palm as if it heats up, urging speed. Every step feels like walking through a city that pretends it does not exist. You pass wagons stacked with bodies again, but now the stacks rise higher, as if death builds walls. You see a child's foot dangling from the pile, toes dusty, too small for the world's cruelty. An old man's arm lies across it, not protective, just placed by chance. Therefore you look away, but looking away does not erase the smell. The air clings to your throat like a hand. At a crossroads, you see men with hooks, long poles used to drag bodies without touching. The hook catches a belt, yanks, and a corpse rolls, head lolling. Someone mutters a prayer, but the prayer sounds like a habit, not a hope. Therefore religion becomes both refuge and exhaustion. But no one knows which saint listens to a city this loud with grief. The hook scrapes stone and sparks fly, tiny bright things in a world gone dim. You reach the palace gate. Guards stand spaced apart, not from discipline but from fear. A guard challenges you, voice rough, spear angled. You start to answer, holding up the seal. But the guard's words break. His knees buckle. He tries to lift his spear, it slips from his hand. Therefore you snatch it before it clatters, because the sound is not just metal on stone. The sound is panic, and panic is a second plague. You feel the spear's weight, heavier than any message. You set it but gently on the stones, as if lowering a child to sleep. The guard's breath comes in hot bursts, wrong and wet. You see sweat bead on his lip, then turn to foam. Therefore you step closer, instinct battling terror. But his eyes fix on you with a pleading that asks for help you cannot give. He whispers a name, maybe his wife, maybe a saint, maybe nothing, and the syllable falls apart in his mouth. You step over him. Your stomach knots because the act feels like betrayal. But the palace needs the message more than the guard needs dignity, because if the chain of command breaks, the city breaks. Therefore you pass under the arch, into corridors that smell of vinegar and lamp smoke. The palace that should feel eternal now feels like a besieged ship. Inside, officials crowd a corridor like soldiers before a breach. You see expensive cloth wrinkled from sleeplessness, eyes raw, cheeks hollowing. 3 men reach for your sealed message at once, hands trembling. Their fingers brush yours, and the touch feels like stepping on ice that might crack. Therefore, you hold the seal up higher, forcing order. But order is an idea, not a shield. A man coughs into his sleeve, and everyone flinches as if an arrow strikes. One official snarls, "Customs must unload." The city starves. Another hisses, "Seal the harbor." The city dies. You see spittle at the corner of his mouth, not from rage but from dryness. Therefore, the corridor becomes a battlefield of words. But words cannot move grain by themselves. Somewhere beyond, a servant drops a tray. The crash echoes like a collapse. You feel the sealed message press into your palm as if it pulses. You hand it to the official whose ring bears authority, because authority is the only tool left that still pretends to work. He breaks the wax with a nail and reads. You watch his eyes move, then stop, then move again faster, as if the letters rearrange into threat. Therefore his face tightens. But he cannot show fear, because fear from him becomes law. He snaps orders to runners, and runners scatter like startled birds. You realize the real siege is not outside the walls. It is inside the chain of command. If the clerks die, pay stops. If pay stops, soldiers drift away to feed families. If soldiers drift away, enemies do not need ladders. They just walk in. Therefore, every cough in this corridor matters more than a barbarian warband at the gates. But the mind rebels at such arithmetic. A palace built for ceremony now runs on triage. Fog of war thickens. Someone whispers Justinian is recovering, that the emperor's fever breaks, that prayers work. Someone else whispers Justinian lies behind locked doors, already a corpse kept warm by lies. You cannot verify either. Therefore you cling to what is real. The corridors stink of sweat, vinegar, fear, and the sound, somewhere deep, of someone sobbing like drowning. But even sobbing becomes suspicious, grief or sickness. A door closes hard, cutting the sound off like a knife. A senior official grabs you again. Run, he says, voice hoarse. Take this to the grain prefect. Tell him, unload with distance. Burn cloth. Pay dockers double. Keep the city fed. You see madness and brilliance tangled together in his eyes. Therefore you accept the new tablet. But you know double pay means empty chests, and empty chests mean mutiny later. Every solution carries a hidden blade. You sprint back through streets that do not cheer couriers anymore. You see a family dragging furniture into a doorway as if wood blocks plague. You hear a father threaten his own son for trying to slip out. Therefore the home becomes a prison. But prisons do not stop hunger. A neighbor pounds on a door, begging for food, and the door stays shut. At the harbor, the grain ship sits like a question no one answers. Dockers stand in knots, faces rapt, eyes wary. You see a man hold a sack of grain at arm's length as if it bites. Therefore unloading becomes theater of caution. But caution slows everything, and slow grain means riots. A soldier steps forward, spear out, and orders men to work. His authority forces motion, but it cannot force safety. You watch sacks move from ship to pier, pier to cart, cart to storehouse. Each sack lands with a dull thud like a heartbeat. You feel relief for a moment, food moves, the city might not starve. Therefore the empire seems to function. But a docker coughs, doubles over, and drops his sack. Grain spills across planks like pale sand. Men freeze, and the spill feels like an omen. Even bread becomes contamination. Someone shouts to burn the spilled grain. Another shouts to scoop it back. Waste means hunger. You see fists clench. Therefore the plague turns neighbors into enemies without needing armies. But a foreman screams louder, forcing the scoop, because hunger wins arguments quickly. The grain goes back into sacks, and nobody admits fear out loud. Night falls, but night does not slow the plague. You move through streets lit by lamps that make faces look like masks. You see smoke columns where households burn bedding. Therefore the city smells like ash and sour wine. But fire also means warmth, and warmth draws people together, and closeness is danger. A man warms his hands at a brazier, then hides a cough with a grin that tries to look normal. In a tenement stairwell, you carry another message, this one to an overseer responsible for body carts. The overseer opens the door only a crack, eyes scanning you like a border guard. You pass the tablet through the gap. You see his hands hesitate before touching it, as if wax itself transmits death. Therefore messages start traveling on sticks, on trays, on anything that avoids skin. But avoidance cannot be perfect. The overseer nods once, then shuts the door fast, sealing himself away. Days compress into a blur of errands, orders, screams, silence. You start measuring time by how often you pass a familiar doorway and find it boarded up. You start recognizing the smell of a house with sickness, vinegar, sweat, and that faint rot that rides underneath. Therefore your feet learn routes that avoid crowds. But routes cannot avoid duty. Every department wants the same thing, hands, hands, hands. You feel hunger gnaw because even couriers miss meals when the city stutters. You bite hard bread and it scratches your gums. You drink water that tastes of copper from pipes and fear. Therefore you swallow quickly and keep moving. But the body keeps score and fatigue makes mistakes. A wrong turn takes you past an alley where bodies lie waiting for carts that never arrive. You see a dog sniff a corpse, then dart away when a stone flies. A man throws the stone, shouting that animals spread it. His voice cracks raw. You feel the crowd's anger looking for somewhere to land. Therefore blame becomes a currency. But blame does not bury the dead. Two men argue over whose district gets carts first, as if death respects boundaries. Another wave hits just when shops dare reopen. You see a vendor lay out figs, hands careful. A customer steps close, inhales, smiles. Therefore life tries to restart. But the vendor suddenly sways, hand going to his armpit as if stung. His smile collapses. The customer recoils so hard he falls backward into a basket. You run again, because running becomes the only proof you are still useful. In a small chapel, you deliver a summons to a priest tasked with last rites. The priest's eyes are ringed with exhaustion. He grips your wrist, too long, as if contact anchors him. Therefore you feel his tremor. But he releases you quickly, remembering fear. He whispers that prayers pile up unanswered like letters with no reader. Outside, you see children playing a new game. They pretend to cough and watch others scatter. Their laughter sounds wrong, thin. You feel anger rise, then collapse into pity. Therefore even innocence reshapes under terror. But parents do not have energy to correct everything. A mother drags a child inside by the ear, and the child screams louder than the plague ever does. The emperor's name moves through the city like a coin passed hand to hand. One day a runner claims Justinian stands again, that the throne does not go empty. You see relief flicker on faces like a lamp catching oil. Therefore some people step outside, testing the air. But the next day another runner claims the emperor's skin turns cold, that doctors whisper, that doors stay locked. Relief snaps back into dread. You carry a message to a pay office. Inside, chests sit open, coins stacked. The clerk counts, but his eyes drift, unfocused. You hear his breath whistle. Therefore you watch him too closely. But he notices and scowls, pride flaring. Pride keeps him upright for another minute, then his hand trembles so hard coins spill, scattering across the floor like hail. A guard bends to help pick them up. The guard's fingers touch coin, then touch the clerk's hand by accident. Both men freeze. You see their eyes widen because touch now equals risk. Therefore, the guard jerks back. But it is too late for certainty. The guard wipes his palm on his tunic until the fabric darkens with sweat. In the streets, you notice something worse than panic: emptiness. Silence settles in places that used to roar: forums, baths, courts. You hear footsteps echo where commerce should drown them. Therefore, the city feels hollowed. But hollow spaces invite other forces: thieves, deserters, opportunists. A shadow slips into an abandoned shop. You cannot tell if it is a looter or a starving father. You pass a group of men with clubs guarding a neighborhood gate. They stop anyone unfamiliar, demanding proof of residence. You see fear turn into authority with no official seal. Therefore, the empire's control fractures into small fortresses. But small fortresses fight each other as easily as they fight illness. A woman pleads to enter to see her sister. The club men refuse, and her wail follows you down the street like a curse. Yet the machine still tries to turn. You deliver orders to reopen certain markets. You deliver orders to close certain baths. You deliver orders to recruit gravediggers with promises of pay and exemptions. You see men sign up, eyes desperate. Therefore, death becomes employment. But those workers die too, and the list of replacements runs out. A foreman stares at an empty lineup and swears until his voice breaks. You feel the city's moral rules collapse under arithmetic. Funerals shrink to a hurried gesture. Rites compress into murmurs. Decency becomes a luxury like silk. You see bodies left at doorsteps with a coin on the chest, payment offered to anyone brave enough to move them. Therefore, grief turns transactional. But even coins lose meaning when bread is uncertain and breath is dangerous. A coin rolls into the gutter and no one stoops to pick it up. Weeks later, the pressure eases, not because victory arrives, but because the wave breaks. You notice fewer carts, fewer screams at night. You see a shop open its shutters fully for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. Therefore, the city dares to inhale. But the inhale catches because everyone waits for the next cough. A single sneeze on a street corner makes 5 people sprint. You stop counting dead because numbers become obscene. Counting feels like trying to measure the sea with a cup. You start counting the living because that feels possible. You recognize survivors by their eyes, older, sharper, carrying invisible weight. Therefore, greetings change. But hugs do not return. A friend lifts a hand in salute from far away, and that distance is the new intimacy. Markets reopen, but not fully. You see stalls with gaps where craftsmen should stand. You see tools hanging unused. A blacksmith's forge sits cold. The man who knows the rhythm of hammer and anvil is gone. Therefore, repairs slow. But the city still breaks. Wheels snap, roofs leak, pipes clog. A woman cries because she cannot find anyone to fix her door, and a broken door now means fear at night. Outside the city, farms go untended. A courier route takes you past fields where grain stands too long, bending, rotting. You smell damp decay. You see crows strut like owners. Therefore, food becomes uncertain even after the ship arrives. But taxes still demand payment even when the taxpayer lies in the ground. A tax collector argues with a widow who holds up empty hands and a hollow face. Armies exist on paper, not in ranks. You deliver a report to a military bureau. The report claims units hold positions, but the courtyard outside shows only a handful of men. You see armor hanging loose on thin bodies. Therefore, campaigns slow, but rivals feel the hesitation like a scent. On distant borders, pressure builds because weakness invites testing. You learn a brutal truth by living it. An empire can win battles and still lose years. It can conquer cities and still fail to repopulate the countryside. It can pass laws and still fail to manufacture healthy lungs. You see new edicts posted, fresh ink on old stone, demanding normal life resume. Therefore, authority insists. But the population moves like an injured animal, cautious, limping, ready to bolt. Normal is not a command. Normal is a body count. The plague returns again, smaller but sharp, like a knife that remembers your ribs. You hear of a street where 3 households fall in a day. You smell vinegar again from windows, see smoke from burned cloth. Therefore, the city's scars reopen. But people respond faster now, not smarter, faster. Speed becomes the only improvement. Imagine standing years later, still in service, still running messages, but now every order carries the echo of that first sailor collapsing. You feel how thin the margin is between a functioning city and a dead one. You see that the emperor's glory depends not only on generals, but on dockers, clerks, gravediggers, midwives, bakers, people whose names do not enter triumph speeches. Therefore, the empire's strength is staffing. But staffing is flesh, and flesh is fragile. A microscopic killer turns every handshake into a gamble. The dust settles, but it never settles evenly. The verdict forms not as a proclamation, but as a ledger of absence. You count empty stools in offices. You count silent forges. You count fields that do not sing with workers. You count soldiers missing from formations that still look impressive in reports. Therefore, the cost is not only death, but time, years, momentum, the sense that tomorrow automatically improves. That faith dies in the same wagons as the bodies. Now the modern mirror rises not as a lecture, but as a reflection in dark water. Do you see the same pattern today? Systems that look invincible because screens glow and packages arrive, but crack when supply lines snap and skilled hands vanish? You feel how quickly confidence turns into hoarding, blame, and distance. Therefore, the story refuses to stay buried in AD 542. But it also refuses simple certainty. Some voices insist this plague nearly unmakes the world. Other voices insist the empire staggers, but endures. In your file, both testimonies remain, because when you live it, certainty is a luxury you do not have. The legacy question waits at the crossroads where duty meets fear. Imagine your own city, your own job, your own family, and a ship, or a flight, or a truck, arrives carrying what everyone needs, but also what nobody can see. You see the sailor collapse again. You feel the sealed message in your palm again. Therefore, the question is not whether an empire falls, but what gets sacrificed to keep it standing. When survival demands choosing between hunger and contagion, which truth do you deliver, and who do you decide is expendable when the corridor fills with shaking hands?